Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajakacharya Astotara Satashi Shrimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adigor Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamayi Ki Jai Jamunamayi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 4, written by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. Srila Prabhupada had just spent a few months in London, and now he wanted to return to America to see how his temples were expanding there. He came to Boston, where he examined the ISKCON press, where his books and the Back to Godhead magazines were being printed. Then he went to the New York Temple, and now he has arrived in Los Angeles on February 25th, 1970. The devotees greeted him very ecstatically at the airport. The Los Angeles devotees received permission to enter their new temple on Watsika Avenue on the date that coincided with the auspicious anniversary of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's appearance day. The rooms had not even been cleaned, and the large hall was bare, but the devotees brought in Prabhupada's Vyasasan from the old temple on La Cienega. And Prabhupada had them place on it a large picture of his spiritual master. Standing before his spiritual master, Prabhupada offered arti, while some 50 disciples gathered around him, chanting Hare Krishna and dancing in the otherwise empty hall. So you can see how auspicious that was. The devotees were staying in a smaller temple. Most of these temples were previously churches, but the congregations, as the people grew older, The congregations dwindled, and the churches were sold, and the devotees bought up these old churches. This also on Watsika Avenue had previously been a very large church. Now finally they got occupancy on the very day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's appearance day. And the first thing that Srila Prabhupada did was he worshipped his spiritual master by placing a photo of his spiritual master on the Vyasa-san, offering artik as we do here on the appearance days of the Acharyas. After the arti, Prabhupada directed his disciples in offering flowers to the picture of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Then, still standing before the Vyasa-san, he said he had nothing to offer his spiritual master on this day except his own disciples. He then read aloud the names of all of his disciples. Taking his seat on a low Vyasa-san beside the large Vyasa-san of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada gave a short history of his Guru Maharaj, son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and powerful Acharya of the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As Prabhupada recalled his first meeting with his spiritual master, he told how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had told him to teach Krishna consciousness to the English-speaking world. So a most auspicious day for the entrance into the temple, and Prabhupada, because he had just come from Boston, he only had his little white attaché case, he offered to his spiritual master his disciples. The grandfather is usually more merciful to the grandchildren than the father. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he being our grandfather, he was very merciful to us, always protecting us. Now we'll find in this particular chapter that Prabhupada was not the only disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that was given the instruction to preach in the English-speaking countries. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati himself had sent several devotees to England and also to Germany to establish centers there. But unfortunately, they were not successful. Srila Prabhupada at that time was a grihasta. And because he had to maintain his family and his business, he didn't have the time that he wanted to spend with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He also wasn't a sannyasi. The sannyasis would spend maximum time with their spiritual master. He explained that he only had about 10 days association with his spiritual master. But from the first time he met his spiritual master to the last letter that was written to him, just days before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati left this world, the same instruction was given to teach Krishna consciousness to the English-speaking world. And Prabhupada meditated on that instruction for decades until finally he had the opportunity to come to America, and now all of his endeavors were successful. He had a temple in New York, in Boston, in Montreal, in Los Angeles, and more temples were being established all throughout the world. He had just come from London. He had a temple in Hamburg. They were looking for temples in Amsterdam, in France. So Prabhupada took the instruction of his spiritual master most seriously and molded his life around that instruction. This large new temple, Prabhupada said, had been provided by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati as a gift for the devotees to use in Krishna's service. They should not become attached to the opulence, Prabhupada said, but they should use this wonderful place for preaching. As he spoke, he wept. Now this picture is several years later. You'll see there's a ground floor and then there's a gallery on top. So Prabhupada had the women up in the gallery, and the men were on the ground floor where the deities were. But everyone had darshan. Everyone had ample space to take darshan of their lordships. And this temple, to this day, at 3764 Watsika Avenue, is still functioning at full capacity. Now bring them prasadam, Prabhupada called, and the feast began. While devotees sat on the floor in rows, Prabhupada from his Vyasasan directed the servers, having them bring another samosa to one devotee, more chutney to another, and so on. He watched over all of them, encouraging them to take Krishna's prasadam. Chaturvidha Sri Bhagavat Prasado Swadvana Triptam Hari Bhakta Sangham Kritvaiva Triptam Bande Goro Sri Charnaravinda. So the spiritual master is very pleased when he sees his disciples taking the 4 different types of Bhagavad Prasad. And here Prabhupada, on this auspicious occasion, he was overseeing all the devotees in lines. There were 50 devotees there, at least, taking prasadam together, directing the servers what to give to each of the devotees as they were walking through the rows. That afternoon, Prabhupada toured the buildings. In addition to the main hall, which he would have the devotees convert into a temple, he saw the equally large lecture hall. These rooms, plus a 3-room apartment, ample separate quarters for male and female devotees, a parking lot, and a front lawn, made this the finest physical facility in all of ISKCON. We don't require such a nice place for ourselves, Prabhupada told the temple president Gargamuni. We are prepared to live anywhere, but such a nice place will give us opportunity to invite gentlemen to come and learn about this Krishna consciousness. So on one side of the street was the temple, the lecture hall, and the living facilities for all of the devotees. And gradually what Prabhupada had the devotees do was purchase the apartments across the street from the temple. And that way the grihastas would have a place to raise their families and to have more offices there. Because eventually the Los Angeles temple was called New Dwarka. In Dwarka we know Krishna had 16,108 wives. Each of those wives had 10 sons, and there were unlimited lakhs and lakhs of grandchildren and daughters-in-laws and so many different family members. So eventually this Los Angeles temple became the largest temple in all of ISKCON. And Prabhupada wanted to make sure that there was ample space for expansion, especially for families to bring up their children there. Here we have some little children in front of the temple and the lecture hall. The cost of the building had been $225,000 with a $50,000 down payment. Prabhupada had had more than $10,000 in his book fund, but that was exclusively for printing books. So although he usually didn't like to deal personally in such negotiations, he had made an exception in this case and had asked the other temples to donate to the new world headquarters in Los Angeles. He had even mailed snapshots of the buildings to various temple presidents around the world. Thus he had collected the down payment, and on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance day, ISKCON became the legal owner. So normally the template of opening temples was, just as at 26 2nd Avenue and the other small temples, the devotees would rent a storefront or whatever was available. If it was a church in Montreal, they rented a bowling alley where they had sports, and they converted that into a temple. Everything was on rent because the devotees didn't have any money for down payments. But this was going to be the world headquarters for all of the ISKCON temples. And therefore Prabhupada, he engaged all of the temples to support the down payment of this particular temple. This was the only temple ISKCON actually owned. All the other buildings were leased or rented. And Prabhupada wanted to design everything himself. Hiring professionals would be too expensive, but Prabhupada had plenty of disciples eager to do the renovation. Karandar knew a little carpentry, plumbing, and general construction, and he could learn more by experience. Bhavananda had been a professional designer, and he was filled with Prabhupada's enthusiasm to transform the plain church into a dazzling palace for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, normally in a church, you have a pulpit that's like a lecture area, and behind you'll have a cross. Sometimes it's just a plain cross, or sometimes it's a cross with Lord Jesus Christ being crucified. And sometimes they have some windows with beautiful stained glass pictures from the Bible. But churches in general were not like palaces. But for Rukmini Dwarkadish, Prabhupada wanted to make a palace. And therefore he engaged what Krishna had given him, his disciples. Whatever talents they had, he used those talents for making this temple into a beautiful palace for the Supreme Lord. First you make my apartment, Prabhupada told Bhavananda. Let me move in, and then we will work on the temple room. Bhavananda, we picked out a part of the Los Angeles temple for Prabhupada's quarters, and Karandar built a bathroom. When Prabhupada came up to the rooms, he said, "This will be my sitting room, this will be my bedroom." And when he came to a third room with a skylight means they make a hole in the ceiling and they put a window there so that the natural light comes into the room. He said, "This will be my library." So this is a picture of Prabhupada's quarters. This is his sitting room, and the other rooms we'll see, we'll have a tour in the pictures. This is a picture of Prabhupada's Murti after he left this world. This is Bhavananda speaking. Prabhupada had told me once in Boston that as a child he had lived in a house with blue walls, white marble floors, and orange and gold trim on the curtains and on the walls. Here sometimes they decorate the walls with trim. So we painted the walls of his sitting room blue, and I put in a white tile floor. The drapes were burnt orange satin with gold cords and gold fringe. You can see there the curtains. Prabhupada liked this color scheme very much. In the bedroom, I asked Prabhupada where he wanted his bed, and he said, "Put the bed in the middle of the room." We had put down a rug, and Prabhupada said, "Now you should get sheets and cover the rug with them." In India, they have rugs like this, nice rugs, and they cover them with sheets. And on special days, they take the sheets off. Otherwise, they would become ruined. So I went out and bought sheets. So we can see also in Prabhupada's house a similar setup. The first thing Prabhupada had built when the temple was built here was his house. It was the first house that was ever built for Srila Prabhupada. And then he moved in, and then gradually the temple was built. Bathroom was built, eventually a room for his servant, and then a room for him to take prasadam, a bathroom, a kitchen, step by step. But here the buildings were already built. So Prabhupada was having his disciples, according to the way he lived in India, he was teaching them how to live a very simple life there in America. In America, you don't get marble like you get here in India. So since marble wasn't available, Bhavananda put white tile, which looks something like marble. Prabhupada was in his sitting room when I came in and started putting the sheet over the rug in the bedroom. Prabhupada came in and said, "Yes, this is very nice. Again, I've introduced something new. This is something new for all of you, sheets on rugs. So here we're accustomed, we have duddies. We put the carpets out and then we put a sheet to protect the carpets. And then we can wash the sheets instead of having to wash the carpets. So originally in Prabhupada's quarters here, before his big bed was brought into his main room, the whole room was covered with carpets and then duddies on top. And the visitors and the disciples would come and sit on the duddies, and then every day we would pick up the duddies, wash them, and put down fresh sheets. So Prabhupada was now teaching his disciples in America this system that was prevalent already in India. Then he told me, "Now make sure there are no wrinkles in the sheet." I was on my hands and knees on the rug, and Prabhupada also got down on his hands and knees right next to me. We were both pressing out the wrinkles from the sheet. And when we got to the end, Prabhupada folded the sheet under the rug. He was very happy there because it was our own place. We had never had our own place before. So Prabhupada often quotes one proverb that proprietorship turns sand into gold. Proprietorship, that means when you own something, even if it's something insignificant as sand, because it's yours, it becomes as good as gold because you're the proprietor of it. So now Prabhupada, for the first time, he had his own temple owned by ISKCON, and he was teaching his disciples now how to set up a temple for the first time, a real temple. In the temple room, Prabhupada showed Karandar where to build the 3 altars. He indicated the measurements and instructed that before each altar should be a pair of doors, and over them the symbols of Vishnu, a conch shell over the altar for Guru and Gauranga, a wheel and club over Radha and Krishna's altar in the center, and a lotus over Lord Jagannath's. So here we see the 3 altars. We can't see in the picture the emblems of Vishnu, but they must be there somewhere. The spiritual master's Vyasa-san was to go at the opposite end of the temple, facing Radha and Krishna. The wall should be yellow, which Prabhupada said was in the mode of goodness. The ceiling should be covered with a canopy, and there should be chandeliers. So now Prabhupada was giving for the first time instructions how a temple should look. And once these instructions were given, they were then sent to all the little satellite temples around the world. And we then copied what Prabhupada said. We painted the walls yellow. We didn't have a canopy, so we would get a parachute. We got a parachute and hung that on the ceiling. with a chandelier in the center, trying to do things the way Prabhupada instructed in Los Angeles. Eventually, the Los Angeles became the template or the example for all the temples around the world, how the worship should go on, how the management should go on, how the book distribution should go on. Everything was coming from that one world center where Prabhupada spent a lot of time to train his devotees, and then those instructions went all around the world. Once the altars were completed, Prabhupada wanted to bring the deities, even though much of the renovation was yet unfinished. After constructing an umbrella-covered cart and decorating it with flowers, the devotees brought the deities in procession from the old temple on La Ciénaga Boulevard to their new home. So I couldn't find any pictures of that procession, but here we have Prabhupada offering his obeisances to the deities once the altars are completed. Bhavananda. The first time he came into the temple room after his morning walk, he went to the Guru Gauranga altar and paid his obeisances. We all paid our obeisances. Then he stood up and he went to Radha and Krishna and then paid obeisances. Then to Jagannath, and we all followed. Then we walked back and he sat on his Vyasasana. He told us, now you line up facing each other from the Vyasasana to Radha and Krishna. So the women would be on one side and the men would be on the other side, and they would face each other, and there would be this empty space between the Vyasasana and Radha and Krishna. This way, that way. One way you look is Guru, and the other way God. And then back and forth that way. Always leave this aisle, he said, so I can see. Well, you can see from the picture, although he told them to leave an aisle, not all the devotees cooperated fully. But what Prabhupada wanted was that empty area, so that when he was sitting at his Vyasasana, he would be able to see their lordships directly. Shri Shri Radha Krishna, later called Shri Shri Rukmini Dwarkadish. The deity was the king, Prabhupada said, and all the temple residents were his personal servants. The temple, therefore, should be like a palace. An elaborate temple was important for preaching, Prabhupada explained, because most people, especially Westerners, were not inclined to undergo any austerities for obtaining spiritual life. There was an Indian saying, no one listens to a poor man. Were the devotees to advertise classes on bhakti-yoga in such and such empty field under a certain tree, Prabhupada said, no one would come. But a clean, beautiful building with chandeliers and comfortable rooms would attract many people to visit and become purified. So again, this was the standard that Prabhupada was setting for all of his temples around the world. And you just, if you ever visit, I'm sure all of us have gone to the Delhi temple. In Delhi, we now have 20 temples, and some of them, you go to the Rohini temple, it's just like a beautiful palace. So many of the temples Prabhupada built like this, just like palaces, where the Supreme Lord is treated as a king, and all of the devotees are their servants. We have the Detroit temple, which is Deva Sadan. It's just like a heavenly planet there. We have the Palace of Gold in New Vrindavan. Beautiful, beautiful temples, according to Prabhupada's instructions, how these temples should be so ornate and so attractive that they're attracted to come and see how the Lord is being worshipped so beautifully, because no one listens to a poor man. If we invite people to come and practice yoga under a tree, who will come? But if we invite them to a beautiful, beautiful palatial temple, then they'll come and they'll be so impressed by the beauty of the place, by the cleanliness, just as we have our temple here. When we opened our temple, just the cleanliness itself attracted people to come for darshan. And the standard of worship. So Prabhupada kept this standard of worship very high in all of his temples. Punctuality, cleanliness, so that the deities are worshipped in a timely manner, with opulence. Although we're worshiping Radha and Krishna, because we worship them in an opulent style, therefore it's considered to be the worship of Lakshmi Narayan. The temple was also for those who wanted to live there as Krishna-conscious devotees. Devotees, Prabhupada said, should be willing to live and sleep anywhere. But as the loving, protecting father of his disciples, Prabhupada took great care to establish a large temple and an adequate dormitory facility. He was making a home for his family. To see that his spiritual children had a place to live and practice their devotional service was just another aspect of his mission. So here now we had ample dormitory space for the brahmacharis, for the brahmacharinis, and then across the street was going to be for the grihastas. And you can see over there, see those buckets? We lived communal style. No one even had their own clothes. The clothes would be washed and kept in the buckets, and whatever you could grab from the buckets, that's what you got to wear that day. A special feature of the new temple was Srila Prabhupada's garden. The devotees had excavated a large patch of concrete behind the temple, filled it with earth, surrounded it with a cinder block wall, and planted a lawn with flower gardens all around. Prabhupada, in the evenings, he would come to his garden and he would sit with the devotees, and there would be special guests who would come, professors, scientists, politicians, scholars, and they would discuss with Prabhupada there in the beauty of his garden, in a very congenial atmosphere. Karandar. I had dug some beds. Beds means where you plant flowers, flower beds, along the inside perimeter, and planted a plant here and a plant there. But Prabhupada said, no, plant something everywhere. Everywhere there should be something growing. Everywhere there is a place, you plant something. Let there be growing everywhere. He wanted it overgrown like a jungle, a tropical area where plants just grow luxuriantly everywhere. So here Prabhupada was giving this instruction for his garden in Los Angeles. Again, those instructions were brought to all the temples. When we had our temple opening here, Prabhupada instructed us that along the side of the temple, we should make it like a jungle. Now it's different, but in the very beginning, we had banana trees, we had so many different trees and bushes and flowers growing to make the temple look like a jungle on the outside. In Prabhupada's garden, if you enter, it's the same atmosphere. Plants everywhere. So it gives a beautiful impression of Vrindavan. Right there, it could just be a little space, but with plants growing everywhere, it becomes just like a tropical paradise. Srila Prabhupada always enjoyed sitting in the garden in the evening with the fresh, cool evening air and the fragrance of the flowers. The topics of conversation in the garden were as varied as Srimad Bhagavatam, all different subjects. Sometimes there would be lively conversations with guests or devotees, and sometimes Prabhupada would spend the entire time just chanting, with very little conversation. Sometimes Prabhupada would just have somebody read from the Krishna book. So just as Prabhupada in the evenings would sit in his garden in Los Angeles, when he was here in Vrindavan, he would come and sit in his garden as well. Devotees would sit with him. Now the garden is just the way Prabhupada wanted it, full of plants. We have a fountain in the center. Gives a very nice atmosphere for chanting, for reading, or for conversations with Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said that his mother maintained a garden on the roof of their house when he was young, and that he would go up there in the evenings and play. He remembered that. He always remembered what he liked to do as a child. You would hear him reminisce with pleasure about it. Many times he would comment, "My mother maintained a garden on the roof of our residence, and as a child I would go there in the evening and play. Now I also have such a nice place to come." So in America, because in some places in America there's snow, it gets very cold. So they have to have roofs like this, because when it snows, then the snow comes off of the roofs. But in Los Angeles, California, that's where the sun's always shining in California. So it's similar to Bombay. So therefore the roofs can be flat. So in Calcutta, this is not a picture of Prabhupada's mother's garden, because all over India you have these roof gardens. But it's an example of where the children can come up and play in the evenings, where it's cooler, and the mothers make their gardens up there. So like that, Prabhupada wanted a garden maintained. He couldn't have it on the roof, but he had it behind the temple in his own little private garden. Under Prabhupada's personal direction, the Los Angeles Center became a model for the rest of ISKCON. At the morning Bhagavatam class, for example, he had the devotees responsively chant the Sanskrit mantras after him, and he asked that this become the standard program in all his temples. In May 1970, he wrote to each of his 26 temple presidents throughout North America and Europe, inviting them to visit him at Los Angeles. So Prabhupada's idea, because he was going to stay there in Los Angeles for quite some time now, and set up this place as the example for all the other temples to take as a model. And therefore, instead of him going out to visit all the temples, he wrote to the temple president and said, "You come to Los Angeles, see how we're doing things here, take it back to your temple and replicate it there." So that was Prabhupada's way of training all the devotees simultaneously in all of the 26 temples now. Now at the present moment, I am concentrating my energy in this Los Angeles center as ideal for all other centers in respect of deity worship, arti, kirtan, and other necessary paraphernalia. As I have curtailed my moving program, I wish that you may come here at your convenience and stay here for a few days and see personally how things are going on. And by meeting with me personally for necessary instructions, I hope simultaneously in all centers, the activities will be of the same standard. So this particular picture is a new standard that Prabhupada was setting. Prabhupada would have his morning walk after Mangalartik, He would go to different places wherever he was staying. In Los Angeles, he would usually go to the beach nearby and walk on the sand. Sometimes he would go to botanical gardens, nice places where there was greenery. Then he would come back, there would be Guru Puja, and then there would be Srimad Bhagavatam. So now Prabhupada has set the standard that at the Srimad Bhagavatam beginning, the responsive chanting of the slokas would start, just as we do in all temples now. So that was started there in Los Angeles. Then Prabhupada would give the class. After class, Prabhupada has here a big tray. And on that tray, he has something called Prabhupada cookies. And all the little children who lived in the community, after the class, they would come up one by one, and Prabhupada would give them each a cookie. So this prasad distribution, the formula that Prabhupada gave was kirtan, lecture, kirtan, prasad. Whenever we go out preaching, that formula, it always works. First you have a kirtan, then you give a lecture, then you give another kirtan, and then prasad distribution. So you can see even in our temples in Bombay, Prabhupada also did that. Our temples in India. In Bombay, after his class, he would give out prasadam. There would be a big tray of halava. He would give out to everyone. So this is the standard that Prabhupada was setting up 1970, and to this day, 2026, these same standards are being followed. The temple presidents who visited Prabhupada, most of them young men in their 20s, came with practical as well as philosophical questions. They came with their notebooks, writing down everything from the temple schedule to color schemes, noting the tunes used in the kirtans, learning how to manage a Sankirtan party, and perhaps most important of all, they would note the things Prabhupada did and the words he spoke personally to them. So here we have, this is an initiation ceremony, but you have all the leaders here amongst the men, sannyasis, in charge of the BBT, the big book distributors, the temple presidents, everyone here just watching Prabhupada to see what he said, to see what he did, so that they could learn from him how to advance in their devotional service. The temple presidents would then return to their own centers in Berkeley or Hamburg or Toronto or Sydney. So Sydney is in Australia. That means already Prabhupada has sent the devotees to Australia, glowing with ecstasy and ready to implement dozens of new standards they had imbibed from Prabhupada at the Los Angeles World Headquarters. So here we have, I took some pictures because in the Back to Godhead magazines, every issue in 1970, 1971, they would highlight one temple around the world. It might be Hong Kong, it might be, these particular pictures are from Detroit. Detroit is where Prabhupada sent husband and wife, Bhagavan and Krishna Bhamini, to open a temple. They had joined in Buffalo, New York. Many devotees joined in Buffalo, New York from a yoga class that was being taught by His Grace Rupanuga Prabhu. And they sent devotees to Toronto, to Detroit, all over America to open up temples from the Buffalo Center. So here the devotees are on Sankirtan. They go to the campuses in the colleges and get the students to chant and dance with them. And this is a list of those temples. I'm just going to go through them quickly. We had one in Atlanta, Georgia, that's down in the southern part of America. In Berkeley, that's near San Francisco. In Boston, in Boulder, Colorado, that's a big, Boulder, Colorado, it's a big ski resort area in the mountains. In Buffalo, in Columbus, Ohio, that's where thousands and thousands of students were in universities. In Detroit, that's the big car center where they manufacture all the cars in America. In Hamburg, West Germany. In Honolulu, Hawaii, Prabhupada sent the Gaurasundar and Govindadasi to open a temple there. In Laguna Beach. Laguna Beach is south of Los Angeles. It's a beautiful beach area, a resort area. Many young people were there. Many devotees joined there. In London, in Los Angeles, in Montreal, New Vrindavan, New York City. In Paris, France, from Detroit, Prabhupada sent Bhagavan and Krishna Bhamini to Paris to open a temple. In Philadelphia, in Providence, Rhode Island, also where there's colleges. In San Francisco, in Santa Barbara, also in California. In Seattle, Washington, that's up north near Canada. In St. Louis, that's in the center of America. In Sydney, Australia. In Tokyo, Japan. Prabhupada sent Sudama and Chintamani to Tokyo to open a temple there. In Toronto, Canada, in Vancouver, Canada. Toronto's on one side of the country, on the eastern side of the country. Vancouver's on the other side of the country. And in Washington, D.C., that's the capital of America. So these at that time were the 26 temples that Prabhupada invited all of his temple presidents to come and visit him. Although Prabhupada still spoke of expanding his movement more and more, he seemed content to stay in Los Angeles, reaching the rest of the world through his temple presidents, his Sankirtan parties, and his books. New plans were unfolding, however, and Prabhupada again spoke of a governing body, 12 hand-picked disciples to manage all of ISKCON's affairs. Now this governing body was the setup that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also wanted for his Gaudiya Math, but it didn't fructify. But Prabhupada understood what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted, and therefore he wanted to institute that within ISKCON. And he did that. During the Rath Yatra festival of 1970, there was a meeting in San Francisco, and many presidents of the centers were present. In that meeting, it was resolved that an ad hoc committee be set up to form the constitution which is taken into consideration. My duty was to first appoint 12 persons to my free choice amongst my disciples, and I do it now, and their names are as follows. So the first was Rupanuga Das. He was in charge of our Buffalo temple. He made many, many devotees, Burijan, Jagadish, Bhagavan, Prahladanandan Swami. So many devotees were made by Rupanuga. So he was one of the GBCs. Bhagavan Das. Bhagavan made the Detroit temple, then he opened up all of Europe. By the 1990s, he had thousands of disciples all over Europe. Shyama Das, that was Prabhupada's secretary, who had gone to open the temple in London with Malati and Guru Das and Mukunda and the others. Satsvarup Das. Satsvarup was the president of the Boston temple. He was overseeing the ISKCON press, very responsible. Prabhupada instructed him to write. He was always writing articles. He was the editor of our BTG. Karandar. Karandar, we're hearing his name in reference to the Los Angeles temple. Los Angeles temple, Karandar was the president for many, many years there. So he also became a GBC. Hansaduta. Hansaduta went up to Montreal, and from Montreal he went to Germany because his roots were in Germany, and he made many temples throughout Germany. Then he came here to India after that. Tamal Krishna joined in San Francisco, and he set up the Sankirtan parties. He taught the devotees about Sankirtan, about book distribution. Prabhupada had brought him to London to set up Sankirtan and book distribution in Europe. Then he brought him to India to be our first GBC here. Sudama was sent to Tokyo, so he was going to be the GBC also. Bali Mardan was sent to Australia, so he opened up the temples in Australia along with Upendra Das. Jagadish was sent to, he also joined in Buffalo. He was sent to open up the temples in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, all there. He was a GBC there in Canada with his wife, Lakshmi Moni. Hayagriva was in charge, along with Kirtananda Swami, of our New Vrindavan project. And Krishna Das, he joined in San Francisco. His sister was Saradia. We heard about Saradia, who was at the Boston Temple last week. So he went to Germany to help Shivananda Prabhu with the German temple. So these are the first 12 original GBC members. These personalities are now considered as my direct representatives. While I am living, they will act as my zonal secretaries, and after my demise, they will be known as executors. So this was in 1970, the summer of 1970, the Prabhupada set up the GBC. He also spoke of initiating more sannyasis and taking them with him to India to train as itinerant preachers. That's Parbrajacacharyas, itinerant preachers. And to ensure that his books were regularly and properly printed, he wanted to form a special committee in charge of book publication. So that was the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust agreement. It's dated May 1972, May 29th, 1972. And we have a disciple of Prabhupada, Shuddhi Das, who comes here quite often to Vrindavan. He was one of the first devotees who went to open a temple in South Africa. He joined in Laguna Beach, and his mother was an attorney. So Srila Prabhupada had Shuddhi's mother make this BBT trust. The BBT that we're now, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, that's going on till this very day. This is the original format. I'll just read the major titles. I can't read the whole thing right now. I.A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, disciple of Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa, XO at Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada, hereby give and transfer all of my books and all property rights incidental thereto, as hereinafter described, to A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Bali Mardan Das Brahmachari, and Karandar Das Adhikari as trustees in trust for the purpose hereinafter stated, and to be administered in accordance with the provisions hereinafter set forth. 1. The trust fund. That's what's going to happen to the finances. 2. The purpose of the trust. 3. The use of the trust fund. No. 1 is the trust fund. 2 is the name of the trust. 3 is the purpose of the trust. 4 is the use of the trust fund. 5 is the management of trust fund. 6 is appointment of trustees. For instance, Gopal Krishna Maharaj, when Prabhupada established the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust here in India, we have Bhaktivedanta Book Trust now expanded into Europe, into Australia, into Africa, and India. But the original was here in Los Angeles. So the appointment of trustees, then the term of trust, and then Prabhupada signs it. The trustees hereby accept this trust and the obligations imposed thereby, and undertake to hold, manage, and administer the trust fund in accordance with the terms of this agreement. So Srila Prabhupada was very careful that the funds generated from the book distribution would be used specifically for the regeneration, the reprinting of more books, and occasionally he would give the monies for different projects, such as for Mayapur project. You'll see when you enter our temple, the Vrindavan temple, on the left-hand wall, you'll see there, Prabhupada gave the BBT funds to help build our Vrindavan temple. So Prabhupada was managing the funds, he was overseeing, but he appointed two of his responsible disciples, that was Bali Mardan and Karandar, to take care of the management of the BBT. Sometimes managing his worldwide religious movement, sometimes leading the growing group of devotees in chanting Sanskrit mantras in the Los Angeles temple, and sometimes sitting alone and translating in the pre-dawn hours. Prabhupada lived happily in Los Angeles. So Prabhupada's daily schedule began at about 1 o'clock in the morning. He would take rest from about 11 to 1. Then he would rise at 1 o'clock. And in the early hours, when all of his children were sleeping, that's when he would do his translation work until Mangalarti time. Then he would chant his Gayatri. Then after Mangalarti, he would go on his morning walk, speak with the devotees, come back for the morning program in the temple. Then he would come to his quarters, take prasadam. Then he would rest, a little bit of rest, maybe an hour. And then he would take his massage. And during his massage, he would do his correspondence. He would dictate answers to his letters. And then he would have his lunch. He would bathe, have his lunch, rest for a little while, and then in the evening, take a tour of wherever he was, whichever temples it was that he was visiting. He would call his managers and speak to them. Then he would have public darshan in the evening time. Whoever wanted to come and speak to Prabhupada, sit with him in his quarters, they could speak to him then. Then there would be evening arti, and then Prabhupada would give Bhagavad-Gita class in the evenings. Then he would come back to his quarters, have his evening meal, sometimes kachori, sometimes paratha, sometimes murti, and hot milk, sandesh, rest for 2 hours, and then again, every day, wherever Prabhupada was, this was his daily schedule. And there was no question of jet lag. Whenever Prabhupada landed somewhere, whatever time it was, he would pick up his schedule from that time. One day, a record arrived from London. The London devotees, who with George Harrison's help had already produced an album, had now also released a new single, Govinda. The song consisted of verses Prabhupada had taught them from Brahma Samhita, each verse ending with the refrain, Govindam Adipurusham, Tamaham Bhajami. Prabhupada asked that the record be played during the morning program in the temple. The next morning, after he had entered the temple room, bowed down before the deity, and taken his seat on the Vyasasana to begin the class, the record began. So to this day, we're still playing the same exact Govinda record that Prabhupada established at this time in 1970. So now we're ready for the Hindi portion of the class. Hare Krishna, Jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,